The stars had always been quiet, cold, ancient, and indifferent, like gods watching from afar. For thousands of years, the galaxy knew balance. Empires rose, alliances formed, conflicts flared, but everything followed a pattern. Until that day. Until they saw something they couldn't explain, something enormous, silent, human. Captain Drekor of the Valari Dominion had seen countless battles. He had turned planets into ashes, shattered moons, silenced rebellions. His war record was the kind that made lesser species surrender at the mere mention of his name. He didn't flinch easily, but that moment, when their forward scout relay intercepted a shadow drifting near the edge of Dominion space, he felt it. A chill. Not from fear, from something worse. Uncertainty. "Is that a ship?" his second officer asked, his voice barely a whisper. The screen showed a blur, a shape blotting out the stars behind it. No signals, no emissions, no recognition codes. Just mass, raw and immense. "It's a trick," Drekker muttered. "No civilization builds anything that big. Not even the Ashkara swarm. They don't have the tech. No one does." But there it was, drifting near the edge of Sector 9A. No weapons activated, no engines burning. Just there, like a ghost waiting to be noticed. The Dominion scrambled. 5 scout ships sent. 2 never reported back. The other 3 returned with shaky data and terrified crew. One pilot said the ship looked like it had been carved from a dead planet. Another claimed its surface was covered in scars, like it had been through 1,000 wars and never once stopped to rest. And then came the signal. A single transmission. One frequency. No words, just a low, pulsing hum. It wasn't a language. It wasn't even code. It was a presence, like a heartbeat. Drekker ordered a war fleet assembled. 200 ships, flagships, destroyers, cruisers, enough to level a star system. They closed in slowly. He didn't like it. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. A kind of animal sense he hadn't felt in decades, like walking into a cave where something ancient and hungry slept. The ship had no name. No markings, no escort. It wasn't cloaked, but it might as well have been. Every time Dominion sensors tried to scan it, they came back blank. It was there, but it wasn't. It absorbed light, bent signals. One tech joked that maybe it was the universe refusing to look at it. Then the silence broke. A voice, deep and distorted, echoed through every Dominion comm channel simultaneously, not just fleet-wide, everywhere. From the bridge of Drekker's flagship to the mining stations on Darvos 5 to the orphan colonies on the edge of nowhere. It said only 3 words. "We are awake." Panic swept across the fleet. Fighters scrambled, targeting systems locked on. The Dominion was ready to fire. But the warship didn't move. Drekker hesitated. For the first time in his career, he didn't know what to do. He looked at the beast before him, its hull made of blackened alloy, its size so monstrous it made even the Dominion flagships look like insects. He asked for identification. He demanded response. He threatened destruction. The voice came again. Same tone. Same stillness. "You threatened us once. You forgot. We did not." And then it happened. In less than 8 seconds, 30 Dominion warships vanished, not exploded, vanished, as if erased from time. No flashes, no debris, just gone. The remaining ships scattered. Communications broke down. Orders meant nothing. Discipline crumbled under the weight of sheer awe and terror. Drekker stood at the viewport, fists clenched. He'd seen worlds burn. He'd made them burn. But now, he faced something far beyond firepower or politics. He didn't know what this was, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity. It was human. And for the first time in galactic history, the silence of space wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Because now the stars knew fear. Drekker didn't sleep. Not in the hours following the encounter. Not while the survivors of the 200-ship fleet limped back to Dominion space, their comms shattered, their minds shaken, their pride bleeding in silence. He stood at the forward viewport of his flagship, Velzarn, hands behind his back, staring at the empty void where 30 warships had once existed. Gone. No debris, no wreckage, not even radiation trails. It was as if those ships had never been part of the known universe. The bridge was quiet, not in the controlled military discipline kind of way. Quiet like a funeral hall after the coffin lid shuts. Officers who had once barked orders now whispered. Even the younger soldiers, once drunk on the invincibility of the Dominion's name, sat stiff, pale, pretending they weren't trembling. And the silence outside? It lingered. That monstrous vessel hadn't moved an inch since its declaration. The human voice, flat, emotionless, still rang in Drekkor's skull like a curse. "We are awake." He had asked for everything they knew about humanity. He regretted not doing it earlier. Humanity had vanished from the political scene nearly 200 years ago. Some assumed they destroyed themselves, as their planet fell into social chaos, mass uprisings, ideological implosions, and backstabbing alliances. Others believed they migrated inward, toward the core systems, sealing off their territory with automated defenses. But no one really knew. They weren't part of the council. They had no trade routes, no known ambassadors. For most empires, humans had become myth, a dead race that once screamed across the stars like wildfire and then simply disappeared. Until now. An aide approached him, young, barely promoted, hands shaking. "Sir," the aide whispered, eyes darting toward the viewport. "High Command is calling. They want a report." "Tell them to wait." "But sir, tell them I'm watching the graveyard of 30 ships and I don't feel like speaking to bureaucrats hiding behind 10 layers of planetary defense grids." The aide hesitated, then nodded and left, almost stumbling in his rush. Drekker turned back toward the void. Toward it. The warship. It hadn't fired a shot. No visible weapons, no flares of energy, just vanished ships, like someone edited them out of reality. And if 30 ships disappeared in seconds, how many more would follow if provoked again? Was this the product of human vengeance? Or had they become something else entirely? He remembered a briefing from years ago, back when humans were still a strategic curiosity. One of the Dominion intelligence officers had shared fragments of intercepted human transmissions. Old stuff, before they went silent. One quote stuck with him, not for its threat, but its calm certainty. "We don't fight to win, we fight so that no one ever tries again." At the time, they all laughed. Arrogance, classic human drama. They were good at threats, but now? Drekker wasn't so sure. Maybe they weren't just good at talking. Maybe they were good at making sure the last word was always theirs. Hours passed, and then a signal. From the humans. Director. Personal. "Captain Drekker of the Valari Dominion," the voice said. It was male. Calm. Human. Drekker tensed. The bridge froze. "I am Commander Varen of the Titan-class warship, Black Eden. You trespassed into sovereign human territory." No emotion. No aggression. Just a statement of fact. "You brought 200 ships. You threatened annihilation. And you lied." Drekker's voice was rough when he answered. "Lied about what?" The reply came instantly. "You pretended the galaxy was yours." Silence again. Drekker's jaw clenched. He hated being spoken to like a child. Like he wasn't in command. Like he wasn't Drecker, the Butcher of Varn, the Hammer of the Eastern Reach. But he said nothing. The moment demanded stillness. The human voice continued. We left. Not because we were weak, because we were disappointed. We watched your empires, your pettiness, your obsession with dominance. We hoped you would grow. You didn't. A pause. Now we return. Not to conquer, but to clean. The word echoed. Clean, not invade, not destroy. Clean. Like they saw the galaxy as a mess. Like Drecker's entire existence was filth under their boots. Return to your dominion, Captain. Tell them this. The silence is over. The Titans walk again. We gave the stars peace. They chose noise. The comm line went dead. Drekkor stood frozen. No threats, no demands, just a statement. And somehow that made it worse. The voice hadn't needed to raise itself, because it knew the fear was already there. Sir, his first officer whispered, should we withdraw? Drekker stared at the monstrous ship one last time. Black Eden. Even its name sounded like a warning. Yes, he said finally. Tell the fleet to pull back. Should we prepare defenses? He turned. Number, prepare a report, a full one. I want High Command to read every word and understand what they've unleashed. He paused, then added, and tell them to stop calling it a warship. The officer frowned. Then what is it? Drekker looked at the stars, now dimmer in its shadow. It's a message. When the fleet returned to Dominion space, the news spread fast. Not because Drekkor announced it. He didn't need to. Survivors spoke. Broken officers wept during debriefings. Ships came back with data too disturbing to dismiss. But the real explosion came when Drekkor's personal report was leaked. An excerpt. The Titan-class vessel is not a ship. It is a verdict. Whatever power fuels its systems does not follow known physics. This is not a matter of diplomacy or war. It is a reckoning. The humans have returned, and they are not here to negotiate. Across the galaxy, fear spread faster than light. Other species began pulling ships from Dominion trade routes. The Ashkara retracted half their fleet to defensive positions. The Saren Collective announced a full audit of their borders. Even the vaunted Varun Archives issued a statement, something they hadn't done in 400 years. Humanity sleeps not for peace, but for precision. The next move will not be ours. Back on the Dominion homeworld, High Command demanded answers. Drekker was summoned, interrogated, threatened with exile. He didn't care. You brought this on us, he told the Admiralty. You poked the gods and mocked their silence. Now they've answered. One admiral sneered. We'll build bigger ships, stronger ones. You make it sound like they're invincible. Drekker laughed for the first time in days. A bitter, hopeless laugh. You don't get it. They left because they were bored. We built fleets. They built monuments. We conquered systems. They mastered silence. He leaned forward. And now the silence is watching. The Admiral said nothing. What could he say? In the months that followed, reports came in from every corner of the galaxy. Ships missing near old human space, entire pirate fleets vanishing without distress signals, colonies built near the border zones found evacuated, no bodies, no damage, just gone. And always, the same three words appeared in deep space logs, sometimes burned into metal, sometimes broadcast across dead frequencies. We are awake. The stars were no longer silent. They were waiting. Drekker sat alone in the observation chamber of the Valari Dominion's core military nexus, buried deep beneath the crust of Zarthan Prime. The polished obsidian walls hummed with quiet energy, casting long shadows over the room. Outside the one-way viewing port, the endless city of the Dominion's capital stretched like a forest of chrome and steel. Towers stabbed the skies, hovercraft zipped through air lanes, and everything buzzed with artificial life. But Drekker wasn't watching the city. His mind was somewhere else. Black Eden. He had whispered the name to himself 1,000 times since the encounter. It echoed in the back of his skull like a curse. The face of that warship, if one could call it that, was burned into his memory, its jagged silhouette blotting out the stars, its surface riddled with ancient scars that suggested not just age, but purpose. Every scrape, every blackened gash felt like a name etched in blood, like trophies. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Sleep was no longer something his body accepted. He had tried sedatives. They made it worse. They slowed the walls of restraint and allowed the images to roam free. Always that silence, always that voice. You pretended the galaxy was yours. The door hissed open. General Rothick entered with the confidence of a man who had never once known fear. His armor gleamed, ceremonial and impractical. Behind him stood 2 security officers, more for show than protection. Drekker didn't even look at them. You look tired, Captain, Rothick said, sitting opposite him. I'm not a captain anymore, Drekker muttered. You stripped that title the moment I returned. The general smiled faintly. You weren't dismissed, Drekker. You were reassigned. Demoted. Reassigned to a position better suited to your talents. Drekker's eyes snapped to his. Stop pretending. I walked through death and came back warning you of gods walking among stars, and you put me in a basement. We're not gods, Rothick said. I wasn't talking about us. Silence. Rothick leaned forward. We're building something. A new fleet. You'll be part of it. We've analyzed the data from your mission. Their ship is powerful, yes, but it's still just metal. We can match that. We can learn. Drekker laughed bitterly. You still think this is about ships. You didn't see what I saw. You didn't feel it. Enlighten me. Drekker stood and walked to the viewport. That thing, that Black Eden, it didn't react. It didn't scan us. It didn't shield. It knew we were there like you know a fly is on your hand. You don't bother swatting it. You just flick it away. That's what it did. We weren't a threat. We were background noise. And yet it spoke to you, Rothick said. Not the fleet, not the Admiralty, you. That means something. Drekker turned slowly. It means it was personal. It remembered us. Humanity did. They remembered what we did centuries ago. The incursions, the containment operations, the trade embargoes. They didn't forget. They just waited. Rothick's face twitched. And what do you propose we do? Kneel? No, Drekker said quietly. Listen. 3 weeks later, the first Titan-class ship was spotted near the Ashkara border. Not 1, but 2. They moved without propulsion. No engines, no trails. Just a shift in the void, as if space itself parted to let them through. Ashkara tried to hail them. They received only coordinates in response. The Ashkara High Lord, arrogant and stubborn, sent a battle fleet to intercept. None returned. An Ashkara trade route, 12 inhabited worlds, went dark within 24 hours. No explosions, no war, just silence. The Saren Collective closed its borders the next day. Their ambassador declared that the age of politics is over, the age of reckoning begins. Across the galaxy, panic gripped systems like a fever. Every species reacted differently. Some fortified. Some fled. Some pretended it wasn't real. But deep inside every government hall, every military headquarters, every backroom war council, one question reigned above all others. What do the humans want? Drekker knew the answer. He felt it in his bones. They wanted the noise gone. Not just war, not politics, not even revenge. They wanted order, their version of it. A cold, terrifying stillness. A galaxy that no longer screamed, no longer burned, no longer postured for dominance. A galaxy that remembered who had walked it first with fire and fury, and who had walked away when it no longer amused them. One night, in his chamber, Drekor reviewed the intercepted logs from a derelict Varun science vessel near the edge of human space. The last entry chilled him. They don't use weapons. They use understanding. They understand matter. They understand entropy. They can reverse it, unmake it, not destroy but erase, not death, removal. And below that, we thought they were primitives who got lucky with fast tech. We were wrong. They weren't ahead of us. They were done with us. He shut the screen. His hands trembled. They had all believed the same lie, that humans were chaotic, primitive, emotional, but that was their disguise. Their rage was never disorganized. Their war was never reckless. It was focused. And now that focus had returned. In the Dominion Senate, debate turned to madness. Some wanted to sue for peace. Others called for a preemptive strike on suspected human border worlds. Rothik, now heading a secret emergency committee, summoned Drekor again. This time the general looked tired. "They're not responding to our envoys," Rothik said. "Our emissaries disappear. No threats, no return messages. Just gone." Drekor said nothing. "They haven't attacked major worlds yet. Only fringe systems. Only those with high conflict indices. Worlds known for slave trade, political coups, instability." Drekor nodded. "They're cleansing." Rothik grimaced. "We can't stop them." "No," Drekor agreed. "But maybe we can surrender to something they respect." "Like what?" "Silence." Rothik blinked. "Withdraw fleets, disarm conflict zones. Show them we understand. Show them we're done shouting." "That would look like fear." Drekor's voice hardened. "It is fear." Rothik sat back. "You're serious?" "If we keep pretending we're still in control," Drekor said, "we'll end up like those 30 ships." And so began the Great Retreat. Across Dominion space, fleets were pulled back, outposts were abandoned, war declarations were cancelled, propaganda called it strategic consolidation. But in the dark, in unmarked channels, they called it what it was. Submission, not to humans, but to the truth. That the galaxy had never belonged to them. That the silence was never peace. It was patience. And now that patience was up, the Dominion Senate was collapsing. Not in fire, not in revolution. Something worse. Quietly. Subtly. The way trees rot from the inside long before they fall. Weeks had passed since the Great Retreat, and still the humans had not responded. No threats, no ultimatums, no demands. They didn't issue laws or treaties. They didn't want tribute. That's what made them terrifying. They didn't want anything. Drekor watched this unraveling from a distance. He had resigned quietly, choosing to live in the outer province of Lorath Prime, a cold, mountainous world known more for ore than politics. He had no rank now, no title, just memories that wouldn't leave him alone, and nightmares. They all shared the same shape, Black Eden. Not firing weapons, not making declarations, just watching. That hollow presence above stars, absorbing their light, watching entire civilizations squabble like insects below it. No movement, no sound, no mercy. A shuttle arrived one evening. He didn't answer the door at first. The knock was too soft, too polite. When he opened it, a man stood there in a long, dark coat. Not Dominion military, not Senate delegation. Captain Drecker? Not anymore. The man didn't blink. Then just Drecker will do. I was told you'd listen. He handed over a small black tablet. What's this? The man didn't answer. He turned and walked back to the shuttle without another word. Drecker shut the door, sat down, and activated the tablet. There was no Dominion seal, no encryption, just a single video file. He played it. The footage opened on a space station. Karsus 9, he recognized it. A station that once served as a black site prison for political dissidents. Officially, it didn't exist. Off the books. Run by private mercenary groups who did the dirty work governments couldn't be seen doing. The video was silent. No sound. Just visuals. He watched as something massive drifted into view beyond the station. No lights, no thrusters, just mass. Dark and endless. The station's defense systems activated. Drecker recognized the flare of plasma turrets, the flicker of orbital mines. None of it fired. The systems went dark. No explosions. No hacking signals. Just gone. Then, the lights inside the station flickered. He could see people inside, guards, prisoners, technicians, rushing, panicking. And then the walls bent inward. No breach, no explosion, just metal folding like paper. In silence. Like the station was being unmade from the inside out. One by one, the lights died. The final frame showed the last remaining viewport, where a guard pressed his face, mouth open in a scream that never reached sound. Behind him, the station collapsed into itself, like a star imploding. The video ended. Drecker sat motionless for several minutes. Then the tablet buzzed. One final message appeared in red text. Noise eliminated. Drecker knew what it meant. Karsus 9 wasn't just a prison. It was a noise generator. It was the kind of place that screamed in the dark, a hidden sin, and the humans had found it. Not to threaten, not to expose, but to erase. He knew then that the humans didn't care about politics. They weren't punishing governments or species. They were responding to chaos, to suffering, to the kind of pointless cruelty that had become normal in galactic civilization. And they weren't doing it with judgment. They were doing it with math. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the cleansing spread. The Yulian tribes, known for raiding unprotected colonies, vanished overnight. Their asteroid citadel, carved into a hollow moon, was gone by morning. No signals, no escape pods. Just a single transmission caught by a passing cargo ship. Cease screaming. The Jinthra Syndicate, who operated black market gene farms, attempted to open diplomatic channels with human space. The channels returned only silence. Within 48 hours, every one of their research stations suffered massive containment failures. Not sabotage, spontaneous entropy acceleration. Systems that should have lasted centuries corroded and collapsed in hours. Whole laboratories melted into sludge. Survivors spoke of seeing shadows outside their reinforced walls. Shadows shaped like nothing they'd ever encountered. Silent. Still. Watching, then gone. And the message returned. Order demands silence. Panic was no longer a whisper. It had become law. Entire empires changed course. The Saren Collective banned armed conflict within its borders. Every fleet grounded. Every weapon stored. Their government issued a universal broadcast that echoed across 14 systems. We do not resist. We do not shout. We remember silence. The Velari Dominion, still reeling, wasn't so quick to fold. High Command initiated a new program, Project Dagger. a desperate attempt to build weapons that could bypass human tech. Drecker was approached to join. He refused. He didn't explain why. He knew what they didn't. This wasn't a war they could fight. The humans weren't attacking for power. They weren't invading for resources. They weren't conquering. They were correcting. He remembered something the human voice had said during their first encounter. "You threatened us once. You forgot. We did not." What had they forgotten? It hit him in the middle of the night, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing. Centuries ago, the Dominion, along with several other species, had conducted covert strikes on human border colonies, testing strength, making sure humanity knew its place. One colony in particular, Arden's Reach, was hit hardest. Over 100,000 humans killed. The excuse was illegal expansion. No one was punished. The incident was erased from public records. Drecker hadn't thought about it in decades. Now he couldn't forget. Arden's Reach. That was the wound. That was the silence humans had carried with them for 200 years. Not rage, not revenge, just memory. The kind of memory that doesn't cry or scream or write history books. The kind of memory that waits. 2 days later, Drecker received a visitor. Not Dominion, not government, a human. It was the first time he'd seen one in person. He opened the door expecting another tablet, another message. Instead, he found a man. Tall, calm, no weapon, no armor, just eyes that saw everything. "You remember," the man said. Drecker didn't speak. "Arden's Reach," the human continued. "You commanded the assault. You didn't pull the trigger, but you gave the order." Drecker nodded slowly. "I was younger." The human tilted his head. "You were obedient." Drecker stared into those impossible eyes. Why now? After all this time? The human didn't smile, didn't frown. "We waited to see if the galaxy would learn. You didn't." He turned to leave, but paused. "You remembered Arden's Reach. That matters." "Is that why I'm still alive?" The human finally smiled. Not warm, not cruel, just acknowledging. "Number, you're alive because you stopped shouting." And then he vanished. No shuttle, no sound, just gone. Drecker stood in the doorway for a long time, alone, listening to the silence. And for the first time in his life, he understood it. The stars had begun to dim. It wasn't the natural aging of systems or the ebb of stellar light. It was something worse, perceived. Ships reported it first. Observation decks where stars once glowed now showed blackened skies. Sensors still confirmed the stars were there, but the light no longer reached the eyes. Astronomers across the galaxy scrambled for answers. They searched for dark matter shifts, anomalies, void blots, anything. But those who had encountered the Titans knew the truth. It wasn't the stars going dark. It was fear. The kind that clouded perception. The kind that made reality bend under the weight of understanding. The kind that said, you were never alone, you were simply ignored. The Dominion called it a psychological phenomenon, void panic syndrome. But deep down, no one believed that. Not anymore. Drecker began writing again. Not reports, not military logs, memoirs. He didn't know why. Maybe because no one else would. Maybe because he didn't want the truth to vanish with him. Not the official truth, but the kind of truth that made your chest tighten and your mouth go dry. He wrote about the war, about Arden's Reach, about the screams from colonists who had no idea why death came raining down, about how the command came from somewhere higher, faceless, buried behind Dominion security layers, and about how no one remembered. Except the humans. That was what struck him deepest. They didn't come back for conquest. They didn't come back waving banners or parading ships. They came back for a single forgotten colony. And with that memory, they began reshaping the entire galaxy, one system at a time. News reached him of a new event, something different. The Kaldran Confederacy had discovered a dead world at the edge of known space. No atmosphere, no structures, just scorched plains and endless black soil. Except, when their landing party approached the central basin, they found something impossible. A city, not built, etched. Carved perfectly into the black stone, miles wide, an entire city sunken into the rock as if pressed from above. No seams, no materials, just shapes, houses, towers, pathways, like a memory sculpted into the planet. No tech, no signals, just silence, and at the center, a monolith. 50 meters tall, smooth, seamless, no inscriptions, until one researcher touched it. Then the words appeared, not written, but burned into their minds like a whisper from the void. Here lies the echo of what you destroyed. We remember the name. Beneath it, Arden's Reach. Drecker dropped the data slate when he read that. His hands shook so violently he had to steady himself against the table. This was more than vengeance. This was record-keeping. This was how humans mourned. By building permanent memory into the bones of dead worlds. By turning silence into monuments. They weren't just erasing the wicked. They were teaching the survivors. The Dominion panicked. The monolith revelation reached High Command within hours, despite every attempt to suppress it. Soldiers began deserting in droves. Low-level officers refused to deploy near human-adjacent sectors. Fleet production dropped by 47%. And worse, people started to agree with the humans. Not openly, at first, not in the Senate or on broadcasts, but in whispers, in underground movements, in graffiti on shattered buildings in war-torn sectors. Let them clean. Silence is safer. Black Eden sees all. Some of the younger generation, born long after the wars, began idolizing the humans, not as heroes, but as forces of nature. They uploaded distorted images of Titan-class warships with reverent music, like sacred hymns. The Dominion called it cultural contamination. Drecker called it truth creeping in. One night, a knock came at Drecker's door again. This time, no tablet, no human. A Dominion agent. Young, nervous. "I was told you saw it," the agent said. Drecker nodded. "They want me to join the new think tank, study the Titans, analyze their intent." "They don't have intent," Drecker said quietly. "They have parameters." The agent frowned. "I don't follow?" "They don't want to win. They don't want to lead. They want quiet." The agent shifted uncomfortably. We intercepted a new signal. It wasn't public. We found it near the ruins of the Krav Coalition." Drecker tensed. "They were wiped out?" "Without a shot fired." The agent handed him a drive. He plugged it in. The signal was audio only. Faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. It repeated every 47 seconds. "Let the noise end." And then a soft, almost mechanical whisper. "Begin recalibration." Drecker paused the file. "What does that mean?" the agent asked. Drecker stared into the distance. "It means they're not just cleaning." He looked at the agent. "It means they're remaking the galaxy." The next few weeks proved him right. Ships began noticing gravitational anomalies near previously quiet zones. Not weapon discharges, not black holes, architectural gravitational shifts. Planets changing shape, moons realigning, star systems slowly reorganizing. As if some massive intelligence were sculpting the galaxy to a new design, the Volari Dominion's Deep Space Observation Array caught the clearest image. A nebula once known for its chaotic gas streams had been altered. The clouds now formed symmetrical patterns, geometric swirls, clean spirals, not natural, not even artistic, intentional, and at the center, a black obelisk, miles long, drifting in absolute silence, just like Black Eden. The Dominion scientists named it the Architect. Drecker didn't argue. It was fitting. Now, the galaxy realized what Drecker had already known. This wasn't retaliation. It wasn't war. It wasn't even punishment. It was recalibration. The humans weren't angry. They were done waiting. They had watched the chaos grow, watched the noise build. And now they were removing it, like static on a screen. They weren't fixing the galaxy. They were erasing what didn't deserve to stay, and building something else, something quieter, something better, on their terms. One final message spread across every system. No warning, no hacking, no delay. Every screen, every common, every display, every mind. It simply appeared. 3 sentences. We were the first to burn. We learned to wait. Now we restore. The message vanished, and every artificial system in the galaxy flickered. For just a second. Just long enough to remind everyone who held the keys. Not the Dominion, not the Council, not the scientists or the traders or the warriors. Just one species, the one that walked away, and then came back. Not with fire, not with noise, but with silence. The Dominion skies were quieter than ever. Not because peace had returned. No, peace required effort, diplomacy, sacrifice. This was submission. A galaxy-wide silence not born from resolution, but from fear. The kind that creeps into the bones. The kind that makes you afraid to whisper too loud, in case something out there is still listening. In the capital spires of Zarthan Prime, Drecker walked the halls once reserved for Dominion legends. His boots echoed softly through corridors now half abandoned. Flags once raised in triumph, now drooped in dust-choked corners. The war statues had been dismantled, not by humans, but by the Dominion itself. Quietly, almost reverently, as if trying to erase its own past before the humans reminded them of it. He had been summoned again, not as a soldier, not even as a consultant, but as a witness. There were so few left who had faced the Titans and lived to speak of it. The chamber he entered was different this time. No guards, no senators, just one figure at the far end, a woman draped in high-ranking diplomatic robes, the Dominion crest dulled to almost gray. "Drecker," she said, rising. "Thank you for coming." He remained silent. "We need your help." He gave a humorless smirk. "You need a scapegoat." "No," she said softly. "We need a translator." That caught his attention. "Of what?" She walked over and tapped a console. A hologram rose, a massive structure floating over a derelict mining colony near the outer rims. It wasn't a warship. It was a tower. Black, featureless. It had simply appeared overnight, burrowed into the crust of the planet, not built, implanted. There were no energy readings, no atmospheric disturbances, no detectable arrival, she said. It was just there, like it had always been. What happened to the colony? She hesitated. The people changed. How? They stopped talking. Drekor narrowed his eyes. Not out of fear, she added. Out of choice. They woke up the morning after the tower arrived and just stopped. No panic, no violence, no uprising, just quiet. They go to work, they grow food, they maintain the facilities. But no one speaks. No one sleeps much either. And no one dies. No illness, no conflict. Drekker felt something cold unravel in his stomach. They've been stabilized, he muttered. She nodded. That's the word our analysts used, like a system crash that rebooted in safe mode. And you think I can understand this? You faced the Titans. You spoke to one. You survived. They reached out to you once. Maybe they'll do it again. Drekker stared at the hologram. The tower looked wrong. Not alien. Not machine. Inevitable. Prepare my ship, he said. I'll go alone. The journey took 3 days. Drekker didn't sleep. Didn't speak. He spent the time staring at the transmission logs sent from the colony below. There were none. That's what disturbed him most. Not silence, but deliberate silence. The planet came into view, Nerith 12, once a minor mining outpost known for titanium veins and short-lived workers. Now it floated beneath him like a world in prayer. As his shuttle broke atmosphere, he saw it, the tower. Jet black, seamless, it rose from the center of the largest city like a blade stabbed into the earth, not towering above the buildings, dwarfing them. There were no patrols, no guards, just people, walking slowly, purposefully, faces blank, movements minimal. He landed. No one greeted him. No one acknowledged him. He stepped out and felt the pressure instantly, not in the air, but in his mind, like something was sifting through his thoughts, not invading, just examining. He walked through the city. No voices, no animals, no music, just the hum of machines running perfectly. Every person he passed met his gaze, held it, then moved on. Drekker muttered, "What did they do to you?" But no one answered. When he reached the tower's base, he expected resistance. A barrier, a force field. There was none, just a black arch. He stepped through. Inside, the silence was worse, not emptier. Heavier. The walls were smooth, endless. The hallway seemed to stretch forever. Yet he knew he was walking. Knew he was getting closer to something. Then a voice. The same one he had heard from Black Eden. Not over a common. Inside his mind. "We monitored your kind. We observed your structure. The chaos is not inherent. It is choice." He swallowed. "You turned them into machines. Number we removed the option to scream." "Why now?" "Because you spread too far. Because you forgot the cost of your noise." The hallway ended. He stepped into a chamber where there was no floor, no ceiling, only space. Projected. Warped. Real and unreal. In the center floated an orb. Dark. Shimmering. A heart that didn't beat. "You remember Arden's Reach? You carry the name still." Drekker knelt, not in submission but in weight. His legs couldn't hold him anymore. "What? Do you want?" The answer came without pause. A reset. He whispered, "Of what?" "The galaxy." He looked up. "Why not just destroy it all?" "Because there are some worth saving. Some who can learn. Some who finally listen." He realized what they meant, not just humans. Him. The people who stopped shouting, the ones who started remembering. You will return. You will speak. You will tell them the end is not death. The end is recalibration. Drekor asked, and if they don't believe me? The orb pulsed softly. Then we will silence them too. He left the tower hours later. The people still didn't speak. But when they saw him walk past, they bowed their heads. Not to his rank, not to his name, to his understanding. As his shuttle lifted off, he watched the tower vanish. Not fade, not descend, just cease. As if it had never existed. But the memory of it burned behind his eyes, and in his ears the voice echoed. Tell them, we are not angry, we are not cruel, we are only done waiting. Drekker returned to Zarthan Prime under a sky that no longer looked familiar. The atmosphere hadn't changed. The light was the same. The skyline of towers still pierced the heavens like spears, but everything felt slower, measured, like the entire planet was holding its breath and had been doing so for far too long. There were no parades, no press, no ceremony, just a transport crew that barely made eye contact and cleared a path for him in silence. They'd all heard what had happened on Nereth 12. The tower, the people, the message, and most of all, the one man who had entered the heart of silence and returned alive. He wasn't feared anymore. He was something else. A messenger. By the time Drekker reached the upper floors of the Dominion Senate Tower, half the council had already assembled. Not in the traditional amphitheater, but in the emergency command chamber, a low-lit, circular room designed for war briefings, not politics. The air was thick with tension and feigned authority. High Chancellor Varn stood at the head of the table, voice brittle from weeks of panic. "What did you see?" he asked before Drekker could sit. Drekker didn't answer right away. He removed his gloves, placed them on the table, and met Varn's eyes without blinking. "I saw the future," he said. Varn scowled. "Be more specific." "I saw a civilization designed without noise, without ego, without war. I saw systems that don't require control because their function is control." "Slavery," spat another senator. Drekker's eyes snapped toward him. Number something worse. Contentment without choice. Silence fell. A few shifted uneasily. "Is it weaponized?" someone asked. "The tower?" "It is the weapon," Drekker replied. "Not to kill, but to alter. It doesn't conquer your cities. It colonizes your mind." "And what about the people of Nereth 12? They're alive, healthy, efficient, but they're not there anymore. Not like before." "Then it's a form of mind control." Drekker shook his head. "Number, they still make choices. They just don't want to talk. They don't want conflict. They don't ask questions. They're content." The tower didn't force them into silence. It showed them silence, and they accepted it. One senator laughed bitterly. "So what are we dealing with? A religion?" "No," Drekker said coldly. "A recalibration protocol, and it's not interested in belief, only in removing destabilization." Chancellor Varn leaned forward. "Can we stop it?" Drekker didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his hands, then said, "You're asking the wrong question." "Then what is the question?" Varn snapped. "How much of us is worth saving?" The room went dead still. Later, Drekker stood at the edge of the palace balcony, staring out at the world he once helped command. The stars above were dimmer now, not in truth, but in spirit. No one looked up anymore. No one told stories about explorers or war heroes. Children didn't pretend to fly ships. No recruitment posters. No propaganda. The war machine had choked on its own silence. Someone joined him. Soft steps. No armor. It was Chancellor Varn. "I hate you for being right," Varn muttered. Drekker smirked. "You should. It means I failed long before I knew what I was doing." Varn stared up. "We've started dismantling the Outer Rim garrisons. Retired half the fleet. You're hoping they'll see it as good behavior?" Varn nodded. "They won't," Drekker said. "They don't judge you by what you do now. They judge you by what made you think you had the right before. You make it sound hopeless." Drekker turned to him. "It is hopeless if we keep trying to lead the galaxy. But maybe it isn't if we start listening to it." Within weeks, similar towers began appearing across other star systems, one in the burned-out ruins of the Cauldron Wastes, where two rival governments had waged war for a decade over mineral rights. One on Mirathel 7, a leisure world turned into a corporate utopia built on the bones of forgotten slaves. One even deep inside the void, the cold stretch of uninhabitable stars where nothing had ever lived or moved. Except now, something had. Ships sent to observe were never harmed, not attacked. But when they returned, their crews spoke little. They abandoned their positions, retired early, vanished into quiet corners of society. Every one of them said the same thing. "It showed us what could be." The towers had no weapons, because they were the weapon. And they didn't fire. They whispered. Back on Zarthon Prime, Drekker was approached by an unexpected figure, an elder Serin diplomat, once a bitter political rival during the border wars. "You still dream of them?" the Serin asked. Drekker didn't have to ask who. "Every night," he admitted. "I do too." They sat on a cold stone bench near the edge of the monument fields, once a place to honor Dominion victories, now slowly being repurposed into gardens. "I think the humans gave up on talking because no one ever listened," the Serin said. "So now they're showing us what silence really means." Drekker nodded. "And they've had centuries to perfect it." The Serin turned to him. "We deserve it, don't we?" "Yes," Drekker said without hesitation. "But not all of us." A pause. "Just most." Then came the final signal. It arrived across every system simultaneously. Not a voice, not a message, a pattern. 5 tones, repeating, software measured, translated into binary, then waveforms, then light pulses. Eventually, researchers discovered the pattern was a map, not of locations, of decisions. 3 branches. 1. Assimilation into the recalibrated zones. 2. Surrender of technological power and relocation to observation colonies. 3. Resistance. The first 2 ended in continuation. The third ended in termination. No threats, no emotion, just choices. The humans didn't say which was right or wrong. They just made it clear that this was no longer a conversation. It was the end of history's argument. Drekker stood before the Dominion's War Council, what remained of it. He looked at the tired faces, the trembling hands, the men and women who had once plotted entire star-crushing campaigns and now flinched when the lights flickered. "You can choose resistance," he said, "but it won't be war. It won't be a battle. It'll be a shutdown. Quick, clinical, forgotten." Someone asked, "And if we surrender everything?" Drekker shook his head. "Then you get to live. Not as rulers, not as warriors, but as witnesses. You'll remember what the galaxy used to be. You'll serve a purpose, not one of command, but of contrast. Silence. Then Varn stood. "We're not ready to decide." Drekker looked at him. "You already have." The sky above Zarthan Prime was no longer empty. It had changed, not with color or flame, but with the presence that no one dared name aloud. Dozens of Titan-class vessels now drifted quietly in high orbit. No formation, no declaration. Just there, as if they'd always been, waiting for a galaxy to finally stop resisting its own sickness. They cast no shadows. They made no noise. But every soul below knew exactly where they were. Humanity had not invaded. It had arrived. And the stars, once full of ambition and arrogance, now pulsed in rhythm with a new truth. Silence was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of understanding. Drekker stood on the western wall of the old Dominion Military Academy. The courtyard below, once used for parades and combat drills, was now a public garden. Former generals walked alongside orphans. War widows fed stray animals from their laps. The Academy's battle chants had long been replaced with wind chimes. Even the children played more quietly. He wore no uniform now, just a simple gray coat and gloves. But when he walked, people moved aside. Not in fear, but in recognition. Not of what he was, but what he had become. A relic, a prophet, or maybe just a man who had survived the cleansing. The Chancellor's voice crackled through the private comlink in his collar. "They've given us a date." Drekker didn't ask who they were. There was only one they now. "When?" 3 days. He nodded. "And the people?" "They're preparing. They've accepted the classification. Observation colony. Not a death sentence, not exile, just irrelevance. The Dominion would no longer govern, no longer explore, no longer intervene. It would watch, remember, document, but never speak with authority again. It was mercy of a kind, and punishment of the worst kind. For an empire built on domination, the true execution was not destruction. It was preservation. "You were right," the Chancellor whispered. "They didn't kill us." "No," Drekker murmured. "They buried us alive." On the first day of recalibration, the sky shimmered. Not from heat or light, but from the weight of transition. Across every Dominion-controlled system, architecture shifted. Not collapsed, just simplified. Complex military control nodes broke down into civilian logistics hubs. Research stations recalibrated for atmospheric data rather than weapons development. Factories reprogrammed themselves to build infrastructure tools, solar grids, hydro farms, purifiers. It wasn't magic. It was design. Humanity had not hacked the Dominion systems. They had understood them and rewritten purpose from the root code. People watched silently as their ships restructured, their command towers flattened into libraries, and their artificial intelligences began quoting ancient human philosophies. Order is not control, it is harmony. You do not own the stars, you borrow them. Noise is not strength. Some cried, some knelt. Most simply stood, stunned, as their world shifted. Drekker walked the central boulevard, passing places he'd once ordered bombed during uprisings. Now children planted trees in the same soil that had once been soaked with blood. Not one tower from Black Eden had descended. Not one human had stepped on the surface. This was not occupation, this was redefinition. On the second day, the comms went silent, not jammed, removed. No Dominion broadcast existed anymore. The Council's emergency frequencies, military channels, propaganda loops. They didn't stop. They were unwritten. What replaced them was a single signal, a soft hum, like a heartbeat slowed down and stretched across the stars. It played in every public square, every home, every ship. And then a voice, familiar, calm, unchanging. We do not govern. We do not forgive. We remember. Your noise brought extinction to truth. Now silence preserves what's left of you. Watch. Remember. Do not scream again. That was the last broadcast the Dominion ever received. On the third day, Drekker stood in the heart of the capital. All power grids now functioned perfectly. No outages, no lag. Food grew faster, air was cleaner. There were no sirens, no alarms, no soldiers, and no leaders. The Chancellor had resigned, not out of fear, but acceptance. No one replaced him. The last act of Dominion leadership was a transmission from Drekker. A simple one. His face. No rank. He looked into the lens with eyes older than they had any right to be. We thought we could rule the galaxy. We thought we were meant to lead. We forgot the cost. He paused, then leaned forward. If you're watching this, remember, silence isn't defeat, it's mercy. And mercy is the rarest weapon. The feed cut. There were no cheers, no mourning, just stillness. That night, Drekker sat on the academy wall, just as he had on the first. Above him, the stars were bright again. But now they pulsed with something else. A new constellation had appeared. It wasn't natural. It was a design. A circle, perfect, endless. It wasn't a warning. It was a mark. Humanity's seal, the galaxy's reminder. This was the future now, a future not ruled by chaos, conquest, or declarations, but by the silence of a civilization that once roared louder than any other, then chose to listen instead. The Titans never spoke again. They didn't have to. They had been heard, and across every star, in every mind, one truth remained. When humanity returns, it does not knock. It watches, it waits, and then it recalibrates. Drekker smiled softly. Not because he was happy, but because he understood. And for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to say.